Record. Hi, this is David Rice with Hit Christian Substack. We are also on YouTube and Rumble, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. I'm with Linda Rantz. She is with the Cause of America. She works for the Missouri and the national teams. She also wrote an e-manual titled Missouri Elections Return to Hand Counting. And today she's going to talk to us about hand counting and how she trains people in different counties. Is that right, Linda? Their
Yeah,
teams.
actually all around the country.
Okay. So you train all around the country.
Oh yeah.
So how do you do that? You have to go physically to places or do you Zoom it in?
Nope, actually, one of our levels of training is called Train the Trainers. And that's where we go out and teach a committed group in a county or a state so that they can start training their own. So as a matter of fact, Alabama, we were there and we trained a fantastic group, and they are now leading the charge in Alabama. We don't have to go back. That's the whole thing.
Are
We
they
go
sending
to,
out trainers
yeah,
too?
yeah, well, because once we get them leveled up, they have trainers. They can then teach either the same, train the trainers as a 6 hour day, or I also have an express training program, learn to hand count in 60 minutes or less. And any trainer, anybody who's gone through the 6 hours can go out and do that. And that's a nice one because that goes very quickly. You learn it very fast, and it's really just to show you hand counting is possible. Um, and it is probably the way we need to go to protect our elections.
So people have questions about hand
Mhm.
counting, and
Sure.
hand counting, it's one of those things that's probably been done since the Greeks started dropping different colored stones into a jar.
Yep.
And so it's an ancient tradition and practice, but we have wanted to move recently to machine counting. And I think that's my opinion. I'll let you share your opinion. I think that's because we tend to think that machines will solve a lot of the manual labor problems in our society.
Yeah, so we've had machine counting even going back 100 years or more. There's a
Okay.
lot of different methods of what you would say was a machine. There's been levers and uh, different devices. You'll remember the hanging chads. There's all sorts of things, but the hanging chads are what flipped people to believe that it could only be electronic voting equipment. And that's only been about the last 20 years. So that is what has changed what I believe is the security and the accuracy of our elections is having these electronic equipment, because just the same way you could look at the PC in front of you or the phone in your hand and not really be sure who's listening, what's being captured, what's being shared. The equipment in those voting machines, that's Dell equipment, and some other companies, that make laptops. It's no different than, it's not some high level, big time, cyber device. It's just a PC in that equipment. It's no safer than what you use in your home.
Yeah, it's just basically a motherboard and a chip.
Yes, yes,
Eh,
yes.
You can write code into that chip to do just about anything. And when we were messing with Iran's nuclear factories, we sold them computers, but we wrote code into their computers that would upset their centrifuges and make them run too fast and destroy everything that they were trying to enrich. Sorry, I just had a
Yeah.
decline phone call, but we're good.
Oh,
We're still good.
okay. Yeah, and here's the thing: if you research the word telnet, and I have a link to it I could find, but um, let's see, it was Microsoft, Apple, and Google, I believe, had PCs manufactured for them in the United States because that was, quote, going to keep it safe because those were going to be used by their overseas teams. This is documented in a lot of different magazines, computer type magazines, and that those machines were hacked from the beginning. And those three huge conglomerates of, technology know-how did not know they were hacked, and those machines being used overseas for, I think it was 7 months.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until somebody else found it and advised them that they found the motherboard that you mentioned. There was a communications device disguised as a power coupler. Now,
Mhm.
everybody should go, I don't even know what a power coupler looks like. If you don't know what a power coupler looks like on a motherboard, you would have no idea looking at it going, yep, this machine looks safe. So there's things that they're doing that's far beyond our understanding that makes that technology very, very risky, and dangerous for our elections.
Yeah, and it'd be really easy to hide it. And especially since a lot of our transistors aren't built here in this country anymore.
Yep.
And transistors are the heart of every single device. Well, transistors and of course the logic board. And
Yep.
so we need those to work on the devices, but they're not secure. It's not like they're built in this safe laboratory and everyone has government control around it, and then they're handed off to another government official who builds the devices, and then those are safely secure. It's a wide open market.
It is. There's two experts that are really important to listen to on this subject. So Colonel Sean Smith, retired Air Force he is with Cause of America, and his work in the Air Force was in missiles and satellite control. So
Mhm.
he worked with high level equipment that needed that cybersecurity. He will talk about chain of custody. In order to know that that equipment is safe, you have to watch every single manufacturing step. So if some of the chips are made in, let's say, Taiwan, you have to have chain of custody on it. You have to be watching it. You can't just say, "Hey, send us a shipment of them," and say, "Gosh, I hope they're good." So he talks about that. The other expert is Clay Parikh out of Alabama. Clay is a cybersecurity expert. He is one of the few people in the country qualified to test these electronic voting machines, and he worked in the test lab for 7 years. There's only, I'm not as good on this part of it, but I think there's like maybe two test labs that are qualified in the United States to test electronic voting machine, and he's one of the few people who can test them. And over 7 years, he will tell you they're all hackable.
Yeah.
But why nobody wants to? It's like, well, we put them in there to be tested, but when the guy says they're hackable, nobody cares, right? So why are we bother even testing them?
Well, I think there's just this assumption that, well, I have a couple of theories. One, I think the average person just wants to believe everything's just going to work out and everything's going to be safe, and no one really wants to threaten democracy. Oh, and I use that word loosely.
Hmm.
But there's just that average, I don't want to worry about this problem. I
Hmm.
just want to go vote or not vote, and I don't want to worry about whether my vote counts or not.
Right. It's as simple as I've always been somewhat techie, never at the level we're talking about here, but
Mm,
I'm a person who can speak to my computer, make sure it's fine. And I was one of those people over the years that every family member, every friend, when they had any issue at all, I was their home, I was the family friend tech, whatever. It's like,
yeah,
Linda, my printer won't work. Linda, I can't connect to the internet. Linda, this isn't working. And I could either help them on the phone or I'd have to go to their house to help them. I can't tell you how many I told, look, you've got to have antivirus on your thing. And as we grew and knew more, you've got to have firewalls. You've got to pay for this protection and make sure you have good protection machine. Oh, I just don't need that.
or
You're
VPN. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you're gonna get hacked. You're gonna have all these issues, but they don't see it. They don't want to know it, and it's like I'm just gonna hope for the best. And look where it's gotten us.
Yeah, so and I think that's the average person.
Yes.
And so, but then there are other people who know better.
Hmm.
And like I was talking to you before the interview, there's Missouri Independent. I won't disparage them, but
Hmm.
Missouri Independent wrote an article calling people who want hand counting conspiracy. They said the title, "A Conspiracy Fueled Push to Count Ballots by Hand Gains Traction in Missouri." And so it's one of the 6 states where legislation was introduced to ban the use of ballot tabulators, and which research shows is more accurate than hand counts. So here's the article, and the link that they have is, in fact, research shows that vote tabulators are more accurate than hand counts, which allow for a vast amount of human error, especially when the people counting ballots are overworked and tired around an election. So you have the Missouri Independent saying these things. How do we handle these people and these people who should know better? How do you direct an argument towards them?
Well, so first of all, and I had mentioned this to you earlier, there are what people like to call objections to hand counting, and I call them myths. This
Mm-hmm.
is a myth. I have an article from, it was an interview from NPR, which I tell people we got to go to really trusted sources when we want to find the truth. And NPR has a headline that says, Research finds hand counting ballots to be less accurate and more expensive. The date on that is October 11th of 2022. And it's a headline, and people want to read headlines, and it says research finds. So if all you read is the headline and you're the average person, you're going to go, oh, well, see, it doesn't work. If you scroll through the interview, which they transcribed, you'll get further down to the bottom, and it actually says, well, actually, there's been very few studies that show this.
Yeah.
And then I tell people, well, let's go to another great source. Let's go to the Washington Post. And Washington Post has an article from also from 2022 and that was in April. And it says uh, section 2, it being hand counting, opens up the process to more errors. And they've got a expert from the democracy program at the Brennan Center for Justice. And this person goes on and says all the same stuff too, except later in the article, if you read it, it says the expert said there aren't many studies about the accuracy of hand counting. But a 2012 study looked at error rates for popular hand count methods. Well, first of all, I did go to that link as well. It wasn't a, a study on hand counting. It was a study on whether or not human beings are good at repetitive tasks. So I gave this presentation in Illinois, in Moline, which is home to a John Deere factory. And a gentleman stood up and said, have them come to the factory. I'll show them repetitive tasks and how good
Mhm.
we are at them. So they're pushing, and I don't even know these writers who put this stuff out and why they feel like they maybe just pull from all this old stuff. But the fact of the matter is, when somebody says, and I have heard from people who say, my clerk said, look, when we hand count, we had to stay up till 4 in the morning. We're just not going to do that again. And I say, ask them which process. What did they use? Because a lot of this is hand me down from generation after generation. And I agree, the process might not be right. But the process I read through when Mike Lindell was saying, get rid of machines, my mind said, and replace it with what? So I
Mhm.
started reading the Missouri statutes, found that our statutes on how to count ballots is basically hand counting. The machine, electronic voting equipment came later, and
Mhm.
it's outlined. And so I wrote the complete process for it, and we used it in an actual election. We had 100% accuracy, which I can prove. The fact of the matter is, these studies that say, they're not as accurate as machines in Missouri, the Missouri Independent should know you can't go in and double check those ballots. They do a random test, which is referred to in most of the conspiracy circles, let's just call them that, as a
Mhm.
dog and pony show. They
Yeah.
don't really prove it.
Yeah. And so to your point, if I clicked on the link, and of course this is a screenshot. So if I clicked on the link and I screenshotted the abstract research article that they referring to, and they only had 108 individuals with 15 groups participating. It's a small sample. They talked about the education, and it's pretty high education overall. But they said that if you come down here into the blue text, they use two different types of procedures, but in one procedure there was 1.2% error, and the other procedure there's 1.4% error. Now, of course, they would really need to do this multiple times for multiple studies to really validate anything like they said.
And they,
However,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with that being stated, the article doesn't really talk about machines except right here, the insecure nature of such machines, and it never once showed the accuracy of machines in comparison. And so I didn't find it, at least as I read through it. And so while this says vote tabulators are more accurate than hand counts, the research article that they point to doesn't show that.
No, and if you're getting an error rate, um, that here's where you go in and you look at the process. I will tell you, um, I've had I wrote the process. We presented it to Mike Lindell on December 29th of 2022. We gave it to Jay Ashcroft, our Missouri governor, on January 6th of 2023. It's been more than a year that it's been at the Secretary of State's office, a year and what, 5 months now, almost a year and a half, and not one time has there been a statement made that the process is not does not follow statute or would not work. Whereas in Texas, they have a different method. Their statutes are a little bit different. They
Hmm.
presented theirs to their Secretary of State, who reviewed it and put out a thing that said, yep, it follows statute, does everything. Our Secretary of State, dead silent. But in 2023 of April, we also did that hand count in Osage County. His representatives were there, and not one time since then has there been a public statement by the Secretary of State's office here that there was anything wrong with what happened there or that process. And we finished that night. And they unsealed the ballots that we hand counted, which my thing is that that was a violation, but that's a different story. They unsealed them, they re-hand counted them, and then they ran them through the tabulator, I believe, to try to discredit the hand count. And yet there, there's nothing. There's not a single headline that says, yep, we ran them through the tabulator, we proved it wrong. So process has a big deal to do with accuracy. So does training and practice. Through Cause of America, we have, and that's causeofamerica.org,
Hmm.
all of the hand count materials are up there. They're linked. I have about 500 test ballots loaded up so that once people are trained, they can download, some, because it's a pain in the butt to fill out ballots. And we do a
Yeah.
big ballot, 24 races front and back, it's based on a Missouri ballot. And you can practice, you can do whatever. So is it, people do make mistakes. The process is designed to catch them just the same way you would catch a bad entry in your checkbook. I've had accountants learn the process and go, oh my gosh, this is like double entry bookkeeping. And I have a little bit of background in that, and that's exactly why I designed it that way. So it can be done. People are qualified to do this, and we've done it for centuries, whether we did it with an abacus or something else. We are capable of counting ballots.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that people don't really understand. So I'm trying to get my words around what I want to try to say.
Mhm.
But they look at the situation and they're like, well, it's a machine. A machine can do it faster. It can be easier. I can get home at a decent time if you're one of the counters. Or if you're just an average person, it's like, well, my car always works when I start it. Why won't a machine that counts a piece of paper always work when I put it into the machine?
Mhm.
And going back to our previous conversations, if you look at it, just one Daily Wire account, um, the Dominion machines, some of the information came out after the Dominion tried saying everybody was defaming them, that one of the machines flipped 6,000 votes for President Donald Trump to Democrat Joe Biden. So there is problems with the machines, and it's not foolproof.
They're not, because your car doesn't always turn on. What
No.
happens the morning you get up and you turn the key and it doesn't turn on? How many of us, I mean, maybe a couple decades ago where we had, it was all mechanics, but you have so much computer stuff in your car now that you need them to hook it up to a computer to tell you what's wrong with your car. But that aside, I'll say this, the Greene County lawsuit where Shane Scholler had sued a citizen because she requested the CVRs, which are cast vote records. It's basically like the cash register receipt showing you what ballots had gone through, not who voted or how they voted. But
Hmm.
that lawsuit finally ended in a consent agreement where those CVRs were given. Now, 6,000 ballots, strange that that number comes up again, were mysteriously, damaged. They couldn't be used, but all the other ballots from Greene County were taken and they were analyzed. And the person who analyzes it, Jeff O'Donnell, who has been doing this, and he's also an expert out there, he found the same anomaly in the Greene County ballots as happened, and I don't remember if it was Maricopa or Mesa County, where they found the huge fraud in the algorithm and how it flipped votes. They found that in Greene County. I haven't heard a report come out from Greene County explaining why we had that issue there. And that's just one county out of 114
14.
in
Yeah.
Missouri.
Yeah. And so we we have to go in suspecting that there is an opportunity for people who are dishonest to try to game our machines.
Mhm.
Now, could the argument be made that if we had dishonest people doing the hand ballot counting, that they could game the system also?
Uh, the people cheat. Okay, so people cheat. There's always going to be cheating. They cheat on machines. They cheat any people do cheat. So there's nothing that is 100% foolproof because we just don't have 100% honest people. But here's the difference. An average county has based on a thing I did on AI, you're going to get in an average or polling place, I'm sorry, not county, in an average polling place where you vote, you're going to be maybe 600 ballots. Okay. Above and below that, whatever the numbers are. If you in a hand count system, and at least this process that we have written out, to cheat it completely, you'd have to get everybody, every election judge in that room to agree to the cheat. And
Hmm.
maybe it happens, small counties, who knows? They could cheat 600 ballots, 600 votes, because you're voting in person, you're checking in, you have pieces of paper. If the clerk gives you 1,000 ballots to use, you come back, 600 have been voted, there's 400 blanks. So there's very simple things you look at. It's 600 ballots that could be cheated. In electronic voting, someone with access to the systems with one keystroke could add 10,000 or 100,000 votes or more in
Yeah,
one split second. And then they change the numbers. And what we've learned is they are able to pull it out so you can't even trace it. It's not
yeah,
traceable. So,
ephemeral data. That's what Google calls
mhm,
it. When they don't leave a data trace behind, they will change the results of how many people are offered the opportunity to register to vote, and they will show that most of the people who are Democrat will get more opportunities, 2 to 3 times more opportunities to register to vote than Republicans. But when you try to capture the data, it disappears,
yeah, yeah,
and so there it's built in to go away.
yeah. And Clint Curtis, who in 2004, I believe, gave testimony, he was a whistleblower. He gave testimony before Congress. That's available on YouTube as well. And he was a computer programmer. He's now a lawyer, but he was a computer programmer, and his firm was hired by a Republican, I believe it was a Republican congressman, who asked for an algorithm that could change votes. And he thought, as he was building it, that it was done as a way to um, uh, that they were using it to show, to protect the machines, like, hey, this can happen, we need to take action. Well, on election night, he was watching the election and he came, he goes, looked at his wife and goes, they're using my algorithm. He could actually tell by watching the returns on TV that the algorithm that he had created was being run.
Mm,
He he was a whistleblower. He's still out there now. He goes all over the country explaining, look, I'm the programmer. I control the machine. Whatever I write, you can't find it. And if I tell it to do something, I can also tell it to erase it before you have a chance to find it. And that's the programmer talking. So
mm.
it's the security's not there. But I'd like to talk a little bit about
Go ahead.
accuracy and timing, if that's okay.
Absolutely. This I want to learn from you, so I'm sorry
Okay.
if I directed too much, but go ahead.
No, no, no. It's great. I usually don't spend so much time talking about the machines because there's so much to say that's great about hand counting. But
Sure.
first, I want to say, so Mike Lindell has a great petition out. It's called the Great Petition, and it's just a very simple sentence that says to your county elected official, I want us to move to hand counting ballots and move away from electronic voting. It's a nonpartisan approach. It's just a fairer way. So it's there. And eventually we will take these to these clerks, and the clerks are going to say, because they are taught when they get into this by a clerks association and a bunch of other people, oh no, you got to have this. This makes your life easier. This makes your job easier. This does, all this stuff. And they're going to have those objections slash myths. Well, one of the things is it's going to cost too much. So I created an estimator tool that's now available online at Cause of America. And if you put in some historical election information, which I did, and I have some samples in there from Osage County, St. Charles County, Franklin County in Ohio, which includes the city of Columbia, which is huge. They have 900,000 registered voters. And it shows how long it would take to count in 8 hours, to count the ballots in 8 hours, all of them, every single one, even in a big county like Franklin. In St. Charles County, easily count all the ballots in 8 hours. In Missouri, our laws allow us to start counting ballots an hour after the polls open. So we're actually able to go in and have teams in there that start counting during the day. That counting will be done around the same time at night, depending, when they start and what the last final batches look like, by like say 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Now, what doesn't happen because you're hand counting is that week of preparing machines, getting them
Yeah.
programmed, doing the pre-machine testing, delivering them out to polling places, and then after the election, retrieving all the machines, doing all of the post-election testing, the random logic and accuracy tests. All of that goes away. And in Osage, even though the clerk wrote an opinion piece after the fact and said, well, I actually was an hour and a half later getting home on election night than usual. But what she neglected to say is she was sick the week before the election, homesick,
Hmm.
could not come out of the house sick. And her staff, which is one full-time and one half-time clerk, would have had to do all the pre-machine testing and all the setup for the election. And because they were hand counting that election, none of that had to happen. So she was homesick for a week. And then after the election, she was busy because they recounted everything, but that was their own fault, not ours. Because basically the election was over on election night, except for the verification board.
Okay.
So that, and then the accuracy, like I said, it's there. It's easy to see when you go through the paperwork.
Sure. And so you can test it also. So
Yes.
if I wanted to contest an election result, say I would never run. It's never going to
Mhm.
happen. But say I was running as for a county seat and it was a close vote, 50.1 to 50 or 40.9, right?
Mhm.
So 49.9. Sorry, I got the math wrong. So if I wanted to contest it, it's a lot easier to do that with paper, right? Hand counting.
So, are we talking Missouri or across the country?
Well, let's say Missouri first, but then we can talk
Okay.
across the country.
So in Missouri, to get any kind of a recount, I had people call me after the 2022 mid 2022, 2023, whatever, just one of the recent elections that I was getting calls from people saying my race was too close, it doesn't make sense, but they won't do a recount. You have to fall in a certain percentage in Missouri. They will not open the ballots. And if they open them, if you fall within that certain level, a lot of it, and I didn't study the recount so much, but I believe they run them back through the machine. So it's not like you're going to get a hand count. And that's why when you hear your politicians who are campaigning for office say to you, oh, hand counting's fine, but let's use the machines and just hand count more after the fact. Can't do it
Mhm.
in Missouri. Cannot
Yeah.
do it because the ballots are sealed when they come out of the machine. People begged, they told me they begged their clerk the day after the election, please just run them one more time. And the clerk says, I am not allowed. These ballots are sealed. Okay. So you can't really get that done. You're stuck. And I will tell you, with hand counting, the tally sheets that are there, and the clerk put them up after our April election in Osage. If you look them up, you will see the actual dots of the judges as they're dabbing, as we call it, every vote you get in your column, and they're putting that vote in there for you. You at least can see that part of it. It may not be the recount that you want, but it's not invisible because when you vote and you mark a paper ballot and you feel good about it, because in Missouri, we're fortunate that we mark paper ballots. Georgia, you don't get a paper ballot. You just touch a screen and it gives you a little receipt, kind of the grocery store. Yeah, with a QR code on it, no less. But here you've got a paper ballot, but the minute you put it in that tabulator, it drops into the bottom of the machine and your votes are now ones and zeros. They're just electronic data. So you have
They might as
no
well be
way of
trash,
knowing. Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, it is. And so you don't have the reassurance that even though you voted, and there's so many examples. Oh, you'll hear Michelle, what was her name? Michelle Long Spears or something like that. I believe Georgia. Mike Lindell tells her story all the time. She's a Democrat. She was running for a county level position, I believe, and she thought she had a good chance and she lost. She came in third place. And then when she was looking at the polling, her polling place where she votes, she and her husband, she got 0 votes.
Hmm.
And she knew she voted for herself. And she looked at her husband and said, you did vote for me, right? And he swore he did. So she knew it was off at least 2 votes. So with that information, only because of that, because it was 0. If she had gotten like 4 or 5 votes, she would have said, wow, nobody else in she probably would have hated her town, right?
Yeah,
But only because of that, they pulled those ballots out and recounted. And she had like 1,600 votes. Came in first place. She won the election. But
1,600 votes. That's
but
not bad.
yeah, well, I think they did more polling places than just her.
But
And they found out she won the election. Yeah, it's Michelle Long Spears, I believe is her name.
but in a small county election, that's a lot of votes.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't it amazing that somehow the machine didn't count up those votes? That's weird. So, yeah, that's the thing. You just can't know. It's no different. I mean, when I go to the grocery store and whether I let the cashier run the stuff or whether I do it on the self-serve ones, you're running over that scanner. And I watch that thing like a hawk. I'm sorry. That's just how I am. And when the sale price doesn't show up, in some of the stores, they're like, oh, it totals it when you're done. Well, I want to know that I got that sale price. So, I keep an eye on it and then I still check the receipt. But how many times have you bought something and maybe you don't even look at it? Maybe you just trust that machine and you don't know that you didn't get the price that was listed there. You didn't get what it said because it's just a machine. It's just digital. The machine itself is not trying to cheat you, but you have
No,
no idea of the quality of the people who are programming it or the competence, I guess the quality as in honesty. Like,
yeah,
does the store want to make a penny on everything? I mean, if they have 1 million sales and they just up it a penny, how much money is that a day? I don't know. You can't trust electronics that way.
no. Maybe another analogy would be like if you go to the restaurant and they just give you your ticket, but they don't show you, they don't break it down. There's of what you bought a Coke or you bought a salad or you bought the steak dinner. So they don't give you any of that information. There's no way to determine whether they added gratuity into your a check
Mhm.
already and they're now asking for more gratuity on top of it.
Yep.
And so that kind of system that hides what's going on
Mhm.
is always something no one should trust. If
Yep.
it's hiding the information, it's not a system you should trust, whether it's accurate or inaccurate.
Yeah.
No, so
No, and there was a day, I mean, I learned in high school how to reconcile a checkbook. And,
yeah.
I worked hard for years and years to stay up with it. And then luckily, then there's QuickBooks and there's, all different things you can use for it. But I still would watch it carefully. I don't think many people look at their bank statements, either
Hmm.
online or anywhere else, or their checking accounts. And they'll say, watch it just because there just might be an erroneous charge that got charged to your account. You have to take a look. And I people have been taught, I would say, to not question electronics, to
Hmm.
just it's convenient, it's whatever. And look, I've had a clerk in another state tell me that she's starting to hear that they're talking about going to vote by phone and they want us, and they're training people, hey, it's about your phone, it's about being so convenient that all you have to do is touch your phone and you voted, you know no.
No. So if you're wanting training and you want to get in contact with you, there's Cause of America, but the training session itself, what does it look like for the average person who's going to contact you?
So what we do is to put together a training event, we really need someone who can bring together a group. So locally, like let's say here in Missouri, if you can bring together, and we train in groups of 4 when we do the big one, the train the trainers, the 6 hour day. If you really, those people are committed. That's not a looky-loo kind of a class like, oh, I was just curious about hand counting. That's a real committed class that I want to be trained so I can go out and start teaching others. And so it's a 6 hour day. And here in Missouri, we have so many people trained that you could probably have 8 to 16 people come together, get a nice small location, maybe if you have a big enough house or, a church conference room or, someplace free. And the trainer comes out and nobody who works with me, I don't charge, nobody else that works with me charges. So it's
Uh,
really you take care of that part of it and we'll bring all the supplies. And then those people can go out and train. Now, for me, because I'm trying to start it off in other states, um, like I don't know if I had mentioned, I leave for Rhode Island in like 2 days. We're teaching the New England states. And
okay,
yeah, and even Alaska. I mean, we've been to 20 some odd states already, but we'll go in there and we want a minimum of 24 committed people and up to 48. And we have had, like, that's what Alabama did and Georgia and, Oklahoma, a bunch of them. And that's a really organized group. And we just did New York State, which was very exciting. And they're an organized group and they wanted to launch hand counting in their state. And that helps because then they'll put out the word and all you can let us know you're interested. And if we know it's coming to your state or to some area, we can keep you advised like, hey, yeah, the state's going to be doing it. Otherwise, if somebody from New York contacts us now, we'll say, hey, get hold of this group because it belongs to them now.
sure.
So
They're
yeah,
like the
so we'll do
chapter.
that. Yeah. Now I'll be in Cass County Monday night, June 10th, doing a presentation to the Cass County Republican Committee on election laws, but also the express training, which is the fast learn. And most people, the express training is all they need. They
Yeah,
just so they understand. Because honestly, Colonel Sean Smith said he feels hand counting is the victory gardens of our day. If you recall the victory gardens of World
uh,
War One and World War II, where the citizens had to step up and grow food because they had to support the country while, we had troops overseas. To hear it that hand counting is like that, I just think that's so perfect and it's critical because we don't know what's coming. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if our own government will do something. We don't know if those who are coming across our border are going to do something, but elections must happen. There are federal and state and many times county statutes for continuity of government. And it requires that no matter what happens, the work of government must continue, including elections. So our goal is to get out there, teach people, and make sure they understand. It doesn't matter what happens, you may be called on. This may be your moment to step up, to come out and help count an election so that we do not have our election postponed, canceled, or in any other way altered.
yeah. I think everybody should contact you. I'll make sure to put your links in for Cause of America and everything else.
Yeah.
But I
There's a
have,
link, and on the causeofamerica.org site, there's a link that says, I think you click on hand counting simplified, and there's a link in there somewhere that says, click to learn about training. And when you submit that, we get back to you and let you know what we know.
I had one question.
Sure.
So you guys are doing all this training, and why aren't the county clerks training their own staff and the people who volunteer to be election judges to do this hand counting? What's the
Uh,
failure there?
I think that, okay, total opinion here now. So
Yeah,
we're going
sure.
total opinion. My opinion on this is that most of our counties are smaller rural counties. They're class 3 counties, which is based on your income or whatever. Uh, our county clerk, most county clerks make about 30,000 a year. And they do the job not for the money, obviously. They do it because
Mm,
it's in their hometown and it's a white collar job and it's something they can do. I've had a clerk tell me that in Missouri. I just wanted a white collar job in my town so I didn't have to drive to the big city to make money.
sure.
So they do that. They don't come in as election experts. So they're counting on um, training, whether from the Secretary of State's office, which I think is minimal to poor um, opinion, um, or we have statutes in Missouri for every county elected official. That includes your sheriff, your auditor, treasurer, commissioner, and the clerk that they must take 20 hours of training a year or they lose $2,000 of their salary.
Hmm.
And this training must come from a professional association, just a professional association. So that came back in the 1970s. And then in the 80s pops up these county associations of clerks, county associations of sheriffs. Colonel Sean Smith has way more detail on that. He's the one who had taught me this. The federal government used those entities to infiltrate our county level government. And those associations now, I had a 30-year clerk who was retiring say to me, and this is how I got turned on to it,
Hmm.
that she was required by law to attend the annual conference of this association. And I thought that doesn't, who would write a law like that? Well, it doesn't say that. It says you must have 20 hours of training from a association. Over time, our clerks have been, they come in and they're taught, hey, go to the conference once a year. They give you the certificate, you don't lose your money.
Hmm.
They don't get 20 hours of training because the statute says they can also have that amount of time um, exempted by by a association. So if there was a competing association, if this wasn't a monopoly, then you could say, hey, I'll join the one that gives me the best bang for my buck. But it's not. They've been taught that they must go there. So we have gotten, you cannot sunshine request the association because they're a private entity. They're not part of the
Yeah.
government. They're nothing.
Public-private partnership.
But you can sunshine request your clerk for all communications from the association. And if you do that, you'll find that the association sends out emails to the clerks as if they are the representative of them. We elect the clerks and then they
Mm.
listen to the association. They even told the clerks not to go along with the vetting of candidates that the Republican Party started to do. They said, nope, we don't see it. It's this, it's that. And nope, don't go along with it.
Yeah. So one private company with that, which has a monopoly over all the clerks,
Yes.
essentially, is able to create policy and disenfranchise the voter, essentially, if
Yep.
you don't allow vetting and accountability to occur.
Yes, and through Cause of America, because was on state calls with every single state over a 2-week period, we talked to all the states. This is not a Missouri issue. This is all across the country. And this is also the Association of Secretaries of States, the associations of governors, that our clerk wrote a letter to the editor that after our hand count to try to say, oh, it didn't work and all this other stuff, because there was no headlines out of it. So she wrote a letter to the editor. We have found it was distributed across into other states, and we traced back through some sunshine requests, and we believe it was the association, and we believe it was the Secretary of State's office that sent that out. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Right? Without any kind of counterpoint, without any kind of personal opinion. It's just like, oh, we had this clerk write this very cute little article. So they're not our friends they're, I will say this, in my opinion, they are not a friend to the voter, these associations. Not at all.
And they're trying to teach the county clerk to be unfriendly to the voters.
They tell the county clerks, look, count on us. We're here for you. Don't trust these people. I mean, it seeps into our legislature because they've got their lobbyist. And even on the Missouri Association of Counties website, it says at the beginning, we are a lobbyist company or organization. They
Mhm.
lobby against us, against the grassroots or anyone else. So you go in there and you talk to your elected representative, and then the door closes, the lobbyist from the association walks in and says, okay, let me write a check to your campaign and here's what we'd like you to do. So no, it's not, they're not a friend to the voter, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the legal statute requires them to, because it's a monopoly right now, legal statute requires them to spend time at this conference that the lobbyist is putting up.
Oh, but yeah, but it does not require them to go to that conference. It requires them to have 20 hours of training from a professional association. We tried to get that changed very quietly 2 sessions ago.
Yeah.
We tried to go in and just change it to 20 hours of training, period.
Hmm.
Because that's fine. I don't care, 20 hours of training, but go to state tech, learn Excel, learn some skills, but they don't. The clerks have been told they can only get the training if they go to these conferences and these other things. They're not getting, trust me, we ran up the time on the conference 2 years ago. We got the agenda and there was like maybe 9 hours of training, but it was things like the title of the session was "You Make the Difference." How about how to
Oh,
count ballots, or anything, or how to trust them, anything, but no. So,
that's just cultural Marxism seeping
yes.
in everything.
Yep. Yep.
Well, Linda, I do have another interview I have to do this afternoon, but do you have anything you would like to add about your training, what you're doing, the cause of America, that you're proud of, that you want people to know of? So I know that there's probably a lot of barbs coming your way, a lot of arrows and things like that. So if you can talk to something you're really proud of, something you've really done, I would appreciate you sharing that story with everybody.
Well, I would say just going into statute, reading statutes, which were not that tough. I know I have some legal background, but they're not that difficult. And finding that it was there and starting to write the outline that I call it an e-manual because I like saying e-manual.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's available free. And again, you can get it at causeamerica.org, but I've never written a book. I am not even really what I would call a writer because I write in legalese. I have to really work hard not to use therefore and in insofar as,
Yeah.
Um, so the e-manual, when we presented that to Mike Lindell, he had no idea that we were working on it because the man is dedicated everything to, to getting our elections back on track. And so it was that December 29th in 2022. And when we told, and the video, the webinar, we recorded the webinar, you can see it. And, Mike came on and for 20 minutes did his spiel, which is what he does. And then we said, okay, Mike, now we have this to tell you. We told him, and the man was so emotional. And he said, this has been such a bad year. He goes, this is the best news I've had all year. And so he's helped, it's really because of him that we've gotten the word out. And that
Mhm.
a year later, because a year, in January of 2022, nobody was really talking about hand counting. And now there's more processes, there's things out there. And I would say it doesn't matter the process because when the clerk adopts it, they're probably going to change something anyway. But understand that human beings can do this. It's so important to our future. We can hand count. We're not incapable. And you've got to get the word out and break through these myths that they share. And all the tools are right there on causeofamerica.org. And also you can find it on lindellplan.com.
Okay.
Mike Lindell is a hero. And so you can go there and get additional information. And we will be at the Turning Point Action event in Detroit in 2 weeks for what they're calling the People's Convention, and President Trump will be speaking on Saturday night. So we're pretty excited about that.
Okay.
So, yep,
That sounds like a lot of fun. I
yeah,
really appreciate the interview. I know it's a lot of information to cover, and I hope I was able to give you time to speak about everything you wanted to share.
absolutely.
Okay, uh let's see. If you can wait for a few minutes after the interview to do some housekeeping things, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, sure.
But thank you again. We'll go ahead and close and I don't really have a good ending. I just like to say goodbye and
Thank
y'all
you.
take care. All
All
right.
right. Thanks, David.
You're welcome. Bye.